Before the riots broke out in Baltimore this week, postings broke out on social media to, quote, purge. Now, that's the name of a film where all crimes are legal for a 12-hour period. Now, some here say we need to start monitoring social media better to help stop violence like this, what you're seeing on the screen. Are they right? Hi, everybody. I'm Elizabeth McDonald in for David Asman this week. Welcome to Forbes on Fox. Let's go in focus with Steve Forbes, Rich Karlgaard, Sabrina Schaefer, Bill Baldwin, John Tamny, and Bruce Japsen. Now, Rich, police did hear about this, quote, purge message, and you say it's why we need to pay closer attention to what's happening on social media. Explain.
Well, sure. The police should have the same tools that ordinary citizens have, and that includes social media. And technology is moving at a very fast pace, so I think tomorrow will be cameras and drones. All of this is good, but it really kind of obscures the larger message, is that the lack of economic growth in this country since the recession, and particularly in places like Baltimore, has really created the conditions for this kind of an eruption, and it's very sad.
Yeah, Sabrina, but the social media idea, we know that cops have been doing this for some time. What do you think? Do you think it'll work?
Well, look, I think that they had social media that told them that there were going to be riots. Some people would say that they even went too far, that they incited the riots because they were so prepared because of what social media told them. But the fact is that this is just a form of communication. We can't let this be a distraction from what the real story is, which, as Rich points out, is why we have these riots or this rebellion, as some are saying. And it's because of an absolute failure of policies in these urban centers, failure of policing,
right.
You know, a drug war gone awry. So there's so much to talk about.
Right, Bruce, you know, but here's the thing. We've got, you know, cops in Cincinnati using social media to basically disrupt gang-related brawls. But the other flip side of that, Bruce, is we also have cops going on social media to stalk ex-girlfriends. And we've seen that break out in a number of states across the country. Where do you come down on this?
Well, I think, Elizabeth, you know, back to what Rich was saying, I mean, I think it's almost a broader technology question. I mean, the cops need to realize that they're being monitored by people on the street who have iPhones that are taping them. And if you look at, like, the CIA and the FBI, they have analysts back at their offices that are monitoring cybersecurity and social media and stuff, and they're now saying that the people out on the street, like, they all need to be spies and agents. So it's kind of a broader technology question that they need to be on top of everything.
Steve, do you think this is a good way to go? Do you think it'll work?
Well, the key thing is how you use social media. They had plenty of advance warning there was going to be trouble on this, and they didn't act properly on it, both at the state level and in the city level. And then, too, you have to be very careful. There are a lot of figures of speech. You see a bad ball game. Oh, I'd like to kill that pitcher. You don't really mean it. You do have people who go out there and rant and rave. Most of the time, they don't act on it. So if you have useful intelligence, like with gangs, that you know how to interpret these as social media messages, you can act on them. Key thing is judgment. Yeah,
that's true. You know, John Tamny, there's people go on, you know, and have a lot of Twitter tantrums all the time, Twitter squalls. And I'll tell you something, people tend to be in a permanent state of outrage, often on social media. It's tough for cops to basically parse through that to see where the serious violence could come about, right?
Oh, I agree. I think this is a really bad idea. It does not speak ill of police to say that they're not skilled to figure out what's being said and what it means on social media. Most of us couldn't do this. Baltimore is news precisely because it's so rare, and so if cops start policing social media, they're going to be arresting a lot of people who didn't have violent intent in the first place.
Bill Baldwin, you have an interesting idea on how you don't even need social media. What do you think?
Well, let me start by saying I don't want the cops spending their days whiling around waiting for something to happen on Facebook feeds. What they should be doing is everything possible to make sure that they give the residents and the store owners of the poor areas of the city the same security that the prospectors take for granted. And if you want to use high tech, I'd start by installing 1,000 video cameras.
Yeah, we didn't have video cameras, Rich Karlgaard, in this situation with Freddie Gray in the 45 minutes he was in police custody. But, Rich, here's the other downside to social media. Watch what happened with the woman in Atlanta, Georgia. She posted on her Facebook page, quote, "Kill white cops." She's saying starting now, all black people should rise up and shoot at every white cop in the nation starting now. And police arrested arrested and charged her, and they banned her from social media. The charge was disseminating information related to terrorist acts. Rich, what do you think of that?
Well, you know, to Steve's point, it's hard to know what is real and what is the equivalent of kill the ump after a bad call in a baseball game. And this is why I think the police are out of their water, really, and in this area. And I think it takes us into troublesome places. But the big picture, I just can't emphasize enough, is that the lack of economic opportunity, because the recovery has been so lackluster, we're missing $1.5 trillion of economic recovery if we tracked according to normal post-World War II economic recovery.
Yeah,
that's almost 10% of the size of the economy.
Right, and you know, Sabrina, Rich makes a great point. I mean, we know the jobless rate in Baltimore in that area is 25 to 50%. You know, and we have the murder rate is higher than South Africa, according to The Economist magazine. But Sabrina, you know, getting back to the social media issue, I mean, you know, this woman in Atlanta, Georgia, she was basically arrested. If you go into the town square, physical town square in a town, and you say you say kill white cops, I'm not sure she'd be arrested for terrorist activity. It seems to me that that's really an unbelievably pushing of the envelope here.
Well, actually, I wasn't sure if it was. I mean, we have to remember, social media is simply a form of communication. We have cell phones, we have our own voices, we have newspapers. There's ways of getting your message out there, and just because we have free speech doesn't mean you're allowed to say anything you want. So, you know, I think that people have to remember that your social media is not limited. It's not the dinner table, right? If you're putting it out there to thousands of people, it is in effect writing an op-ed, or it is in fact going to the town square and screaming that you should kill people. That is not exactly covered in the First Amendment. So I think that people need to realize that these are tools that can be useful, but as Steve said, we need to use good judgment.
You know, Bruce, to Rich Karlgaard's point, you know, such slack and sluggish economic growth under the Obama administration. We're not going to get into politics here, but what we're talking about is, are we just looking and trying to fix the symptoms and not fixing the broader root causes of what's causing the unrest in Baltimore? In other words, the whole social media thing where you have cops, you know, parsing through social media feeds. I mean, that just feels like the back end of and we're avoiding the front end of the problem.
Well, I think certainly everybody has good points in this regard, and definitely the economic conditions could improve. But I think one of this that could be included with social media and technology is community policing. I mean, every time we have a situation, whether it's Ferguson or whether it's Chicago, wherever it's other, the answer is like, we need to do better community policing. So if you are somebody who sees a neighbor posting some crazy thing on Facebook, at least, I mean, call the cops. You know, just let somebody know.
Steve, should people be banned from social media?
No, unless they're in a proverbial crowded theater, you can't yell fire. But no, because again, unless you've actually done something, and that's a good point about community policing, is precisely knowing when to take something seriously and when you don't. With social media alone, you're not going to have that kind of priceless information. And by the way, in this whole thing in video cameras, having cops have to wear videos might be a good thing, at least for a few days, for people to see. There was a failure in Baltimore, but most cops do their job right. People should see what they have to go through each day.
All right, thanks, gang. Up next, did you hear what Iran's supreme leader tweeted about our cops in America? Is it time now to stop those nuke talks and walk away?